Hey everyone, I'm Nick DiMatteo and welcome to week 190 and video episode number 16 of 4T, the Thursday throwback track. Every week I take a release from my collection, I discuss it, I give you my take on it, I throw in some other stuff, and I talk about how it has influenced my music. Please, as always, don't forget to like, share, comment, click, subscribe, all the social stuff. Please, that's something I tend to forget to mention, and it's very important, I've been told. This week, we are taking a sidetrack and back again into music with 3 releases. As you can hear, let's take a listen. Not really music, is it? Some of you may recognize what this is. But we're taking a sidetrack into comedy. In particular, the 3 albums I have in my collection: Eddie Murphy's first album, Eddie Murphy's second album, Comedian, and Bob and Doug McKenzie's Great White North. Musicians and comedians have been in a love affair since forever. Talk to any one of them and you will hear the reverence for the other, how much they respect the other, how much they often wish they could be the other, how often they try the other. I mean, look at Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon are 2 perfect examples. They salivate over music and musicians. They often do it themselves by choice. In some cases, parodies the way Jimmy Fallon has done, imitating other artists. Or Stephen Colbert certainly does funny songs, but he's done musical theater as well. That's a perfect example. Yes, it's true. You can say that artists of all types, if you've ever been in the community, you know that most artists have more than one discipline. They're the slashes. That's a whatever. I've done that before myself. Kevin Bacon, Jared Leto, both have working bands. Bacon Brothers, 30 Seconds to Mars. You can't be that good at music and not have a passion for it, not have it be something that's central to you. And there are many times that the artists have said in interviews that the thing that they're best known for is not the thing that they're most passionate about. I can't, make that claim for Kevin Bacon and Jared Leto, but to me, it may be possible that either one or both of them, for them, music may be their true passion. And it just so happened that they, came up and became famous as actors first, and that's their meal ticket, and of course they love that too. Then you have people like Tony Bennett and Jim Carrey, who are visual artists and who have a real passion for that. That is a very, more common than we realize. I love graphic arts myself. I wouldn't say it's a giant passion, but it's something I really like to dig into. J-Lo acts, she dances, she sings, she's one very high profile, many examples of people who have more than one talent and more than one passion. But I'm going to make this argument. I think it's absolutely true that nothing supersedes the relationship between music and comedy. The closer you look, the more you see that. Think of things like timing, delivery, tone, pacing, sets, creating set lists, breaking up your art into digestible portions that are still somehow cohesive. You can take that entire list and apply it to music and never even think of comedy. You can take that entire list, apply it to comedy, and never even think of music. It works equally well with both, and it just shows how many links there are between the two. I really think that relationship is much stronger than in any of the other disciplines. I break down the music and comedy relationship into 4 different categories, in the 3 minutes that I've taken to think about this. The first, to me, and I think probably the most, maybe not the most prevalent, but it's comedians who have crossed over into music. Some great examples would be Steve Martin, who, setting aside his early hit in the 70s, which we can talk about later, I think it's a different category, has transitioned legit into banjo music, and he is really good at it. And I'm sure some of those songs are intended to be humorous, but overall the music itself is intended to be music, not for comedic purposes overall. And that, to me, that's a direct transition, crossing over from legit comedy to legit music. Another one, if you remember back this far, Eddie Murphy had a huge hit in the mid '80s. Had put out an entire music album that was really good, and it was not intended to be funny at all. He did comedy. He loves music. He did music. That's what that. Sarah Silverman is another good example, more recent. She's done songs that were again not intended to be funny, and this is why I'm making very clear distinction here for this first category: people who were or are in comedy who make a complete crossover into legit music, not intended to be funny. It happens the other way around. I don't think as often, but it does, where someone who started out in legit music goes into legit comedy. That for the most part has nothing to do with music. Two great examples would be Ricky Gervais, who actually started out as a musician. He started out in the music industry. If you go back into the 80s, he was in a band, I think a duo called New Wave, kind of techno duo called Siona Dancing. They had a couple of big hits in the world in general, not so much in this country, but that was just music. It was music not intended to be funny. They were musicians. They were serious about it, legit about it. And of course, he crossed over into comedy in a big, big way. Then you have Philly hometown favorite Will Smith, Fresh Prince, who, you better remember this if you love Philly at all, started out straight up legit as just a rapper, a hip-hop artist, a writer with Jazzy Jeff, and made his career for many years as just that. And of course, fairly soon after, transitioned into comedy with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and went beyond and beyond, and has continued to do that, and of course went into serious acting too. But that's again an example of somebody who transitioned and crossed over from legit music, not intended to be funny, to legit comedy, which may sometimes include music, but for the most part, didn't or doesn't. Third are the straight up hybrids, those artists and songs that were intended to be funny from the beginning, that used music and comedy equally. Some great examples way back: Alan Sherman, Spike Jonze, not the one with the Z. I love him too, but I'm talking about the early Spike Jonze. Look him up. Mel Brooks, geez, think about all the funny, music he's done with direct, like hybrid, the Inquisition and all that stuff, which my kids discovered a little while back, and I'm so happy that they did. Flight of the Conchords, a recent example. I absolutely love them. Please look them up. Look up their HBO show. Look up their HBO special. Go see them if you can. These awesome, funny New Zealanders who do music and comedy equally. Elaine May and Mike Nichols, they did it way back. Judy Tenuta was known for that. If you are a stand-up comedy fan, you will remember her. Bridget Everett, who's a recent person who's, touted by a lot of people now, who does music and comedy equally. Again, deliberate hybrid. And then you have artists who, and I'm keeping this in the same category because it's about the song, artists who deliberately do comedic songs, who aren't known as, the Beatles were known to be very funny. You can, you saw it in their interviews, you saw it in their movies. They at times did deliberately funny, comedic songs. You Know My Name, Look Up the Number, perfect example. The Beastie Boys were known to be funny. Of course, music was their first passion, as with the Beatles, but they did deliberately funny songs on almost every release they did. So, again, that's kind of that deliberate hybrid. And then to me, there's this other category, which is not crossover at all. Those artists who have parallel lives, who from the get-go did music and comedy equally in ways where they didn't cross over, they didn't meld, they weren't hybrids. A good example, and most recent I think, is Donald Glover, who's also known as Childish Gambino. He's been doing music and comedy, comedic acting from the get-go. When he does or did Community or Atlanta, he's intending to be funny. That is comedy. There might be musical tangents in that, but it's not what it's about. Childish Gambino, I'm sure he has a funny song or two, not intended to be funny though. It is legit hip hop, and it's awesome. So there's the four categories for me. I'm old enough to vaguely remember the first episode of SNL and how tingly I felt when it was debuting. That is a show that's always included both comedy and music from the get-go. It was part of the format. You can tell how much they respected both. The house band has always been awesome. Other than the opening, skit, how's the show start? You have that big booming announcer. I'm going to be talking about this. I'll give you a second for this song. I'm going to come back to this in a second, so remember that. The house band would kick in with that announcer, and then after that, you'd have an opening monologue, and then you'd have sketches, and then you'd have a break for music, and then more sketches, and then another break for music. This is SNL. So many sketch shows did that. In Living Color, always had musicians, things like that. That you can see again the link. You can see that passionate link. But knowing that I remember that SNL and how it felt to me to feel that as a very, very young child, it proves to me that music and comedy have been like this for me my entire life. I've always thoroughly enjoyed being a comedic actor when I have an opportunity to do that. And of course, music is my first and foremost passion. I grew up watching my dad perform nightly and weekly, and of course, music is his first passion. And he would do mostly serious songs, but he'd even do comedic songs too. But he would always take breaks at some point in his set to include jokes, to include comedy of some sort. And I think that had a huge influence on me. When I'm on stage, if I'm doing acoustic music, electronic music, if I'm doing the full band, when I'm doing my own music, most of my music is, serious. It's just music. But I always take time at some point in my set to go for a laugh, to be funny. That's partly because I like to encompass an entire world of existence when I do what I do. I believe that, again, as you all know, music shouldn't be only one thing. Performance shouldn't be only one thing. I think people can handle way more than most marketers give them credit for, and that they can have that inclusion of all the various levels of emotion and expression all in one. And you'll find that not just in my performance, you'll find that in my lyrics as well, which I'm going to get back to in a second. Let's talk about these 3 albums really quick, though. Again, Eddie Murphy's first 2 albums, and the Takeoff, Bob and Doug McKenzie, Great White North. Eddie Murphy has been important to me since he debuted in 1980. He has influenced me in more ways than it's even possible to describe. When he came back and did his Christmas episode last season and reprised some of his characters, the iconic characters, with just as much vibrancy as when they started, it made me tingle. I think I even teared up at some point, and that's how important he's been to me. And of course, again, he had that big hit Party All the Time in the mid-'80s, so there's that link. Bob and Doug McKenzie, actually Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas from SCTV. Don't even get me started on SCTV. I'm going to name it as my absolute, hands down, first love. Well, not first love, but first, I guess super in love, like, oh my God, this blew me away sketch show when it debuted in the States, I think in the early 80s. SCTV was groundbreaking. I think it was the most groundbreaking sketch show of its era, and but I'm gonna say it's my second favorite sketch show. You got to look it up if you don't know what SCTV is. And I know somebody who had never heard of it before, but who knows Rick Moranis, who knows Maureen O'Hara. Is that her name? Yeah, and Eugene Levy and stuff like that. Please look it up. Please, if you are a fan of comedy at all, look up SCTV. Find the skits, please. But my first, let's go back to this. That song you just heard is a song called Takeoff by Bob and Doug McKenzie, and in collaboration with Rush's Geddy Lee. It was a top 10 hit. And in fact, the biggest hit that Geddy Lee ever had in his entire career, bigger than any Rush hit. So again, perfect example, music and comedy. There's success stories like that. But my first favorite sketch show, Mr. Show, with Bob and David, Bob Odenkirk, David Cross, who have of course gone on to, fame and fortune. Better Call Saul for Bob Odenkirk, David Cross in Arrested Development, and so many other things. That to me is still they did no wrong as far as I'm concerned on that show. That is just diamonds, diamond after diamond after diamond, and again, SCTV and Mr. Show. Look them up. Find the skits. You just, if you like comedy, if you love it, just drop down funny. And in both of those cases, again, lots of music was included. So as far as what I do, I'm gonna blow the lid off of this. Gee, get ready. I do intend at some point in the next, hopefully, year or so, to go to an open mic and do a few minutes of comedy. It's something I've been holding off on for a while, and I feel like if I don't get it out of my system, I'll never know, what it means for me to be that. But setting that aside, comedy is not always a part of the music that I do, although I have done straight up songs that were meant to be comedic, such as the theme to This End Up, the theme to Lock Load Love, things like a lot of the music that I have done for the comedic films and shows that I've worked on have been meant to be deliberately funny, that kind of hybrid thing. But for me, the way comedy has infiltrated my music has been in kind of a humanistic, naturalistic sense. My lyrics, every now and then they might be poetic, but I tend to like to write in a conversational way, in a way that sinks into you, like this is somebody talking to you. And of course, when you're talking, you could be talking about stuff that's funny, stuff that's not funny, whatever it is. Again, encompassing kind of the entire world of expression and the inner life, and that has to include humor as well. When it works. So there are songs that might have a serious or an intention is for the message that I'm creating there and wanting to convey, but that have within them humor. Many examples of that, but the two that I'm actually going to go with two this week. One is, and they're both from the same album, the title track of "Listen You People," from the album "Listen You People." The entire chorus. The chorus is a punchline. Parental guidance suggested, but please click on it, listen to it, and you'll understand what I mean when I say that. You can hear the serious message underneath, but there's a punchline there. The second song from that album is called "Sick." And there's no punchline there. That's more of one of those kind of story jokes, I guess you can say. Again, there's a serious message about, existentialism and what's wrong and blah, blah, blah. But it's done in a way where the lyrics are, I believe, kind of irreverent and funny. So, as always, click on those. Please listen to them. Listen to, and listen to them more than once. See if you really start to get what they're about. Click on more songs from that album or another album. Share them. If you please, share them. Those songs are out there in the world, and that's their intention is to be shared. I don't care, share them for free. That's not the point here, is not the money. And of course, read and click on the two links for Eddie Murphy's discography and the Bob and Doug McKenzie album, Great White North. Read the alternative text that I have here, and look at the questions I have. What are some favorite comedians of yours who have crossed over into music and vice versa? Favorite sketch shows of yours? Favorite anything? Do you like any of what I've talked about tonight? Do you like any of the things that you listened to or clicked on? And share and subscribe and like and comment, because as always, this is all about conversation and connection. This has been my longest podcast because I'm really talking about two different things here, and I thank you so much for sticking with me and for listening and reading and watching and all of that as always, and I will see you next week.